I need to make one thing clear right from the start. I didn't make any of this up. What I'm about to tell you has no logical explanation. It's by far the strangest experience I've ever had, or that anyone close to me has ever gone through. I work late at a bar, about 30 minutes from my house, not by choice. It's simply the reality of living in a more remote area where job options are limited. You take whatever comes your way. The bar itself isn't anything special, but it pays the bills, and most nights follow the same monotonous rhythm. The night it all happened, nothing seemed different. The shift ended without incident. I closed the register, turned off the lights, got in the car, and started my drive home. Almost the entire route home is on back roads, full of curves, cutting through patches of forest and farmland. There's almost no traffic, barely any traffic lights, practically nothing. Usually, I enjoy the silence. It's like a kind of decompression after work. A space where I can think about any conversations I had at the bar, or just let my mind wander. But that night, something already felt different. I quickly noticed that the road was strangely covered by a thick fog. I had driven that route hundreds of times, but I didn't remember ever seeing anything this dense. Visibility was minimal. I had to ease off the accelerator and slow down because I could barely see a few meters ahead. Turning on the high beams didn't help. On the contrary, it felt like the fog was bouncing the light straight back at me, as if I were staring at a solid white wall. That started to irritate me because I knew I would get home even later, and I was already exhausted. Then I noticed it. Right in the middle of the fog, slightly off to the right side of the road, a weak, yellowish light appeared, flickering. At first, I thought it was just a reflective road marker, maybe even a distant headlight. But as I drove closer, I noticed something strange. The light wasn't getting closer nor moving away. It just seemed to follow me, flickering in an almost hypnotic rhythm, as if it were walking alongside me, hidden somewhere deeper in the fog. It made no sense. I couldn't gauge the distance or tell whether it was nearby or hundreds of meters away. But it was there, always flickering, always following me. It was as if the fog itself was messing with my perception, distorting everything around me. After another minute of driving with that light flickering in the exact same position, I started to feel a strange tightness in my stomach. Not pure fear, but something more primitive, like my body understood before my mind that something was wrong. I decided to slow down. I thought, if I go slower, the light will reveal itself, or it will fall behind and disappear. But that's not what happened. The more I slowed down, the more it stayed right there, always at my side, flickering with the same perfect cadence, as if calibrated to follow every move I made. When I almost came to a stop, it was still there, so I decided to stop completely. And that's when things got even worse. The light didn't disappear, didn't move. It just kept flickering in the same spot, with the same consistency, as if mocking my attempt to escape. I stared at it for a few seconds, trying to reason whether I should turn around or keep going. But before I could make any decision, the light changed. The flickering didn't stop, but each flash began to grow in intensity. It was like a flame suddenly being fed oxygen, pulsing stronger with each cycle. It didn't flicker faster, but it burned with an almost aggressive presence, as if it were coming to life. It was enough to freeze me to my bones. I decided to get out of there immediately. I reached down to shift into reverse, ready to turn around, but realized the engine had died. The car was completely silent, and that made no sense. I hadn't turned off the key, not even by accident. Why would I do that? At that moment, my hands started to shake, and my hands never shake. I served drinks all night without spilling a drop. But there, on that foggy road, with that light burning outside, it was impossible to control. I turned the key several times, trying to start the car, but nothing happened. The engine was dead, as if something had drained all its power. And the most disturbing part was that, as I kept futilely trying the ignition, the light seemed to feed on it. With each failed attempt, it shone brighter, pulsing as if it were alive, and aware of my helplessness. My heart was racing, like it wanted to jump out of my chest, I had no idea what was happening, and the worst part was knowing there was no one around, not even miles away. In a near-desperate move, I grabbed my phone, thinking I could at least record what I was seeing, or call for help. But as soon as I touched the screen, nothing. Absolute black. The phone had simply died, and I was certain, absolutely certain, that the battery was still at 20%. I had checked it minutes before, at the bar, before leaving. Now it was as useless as the car's engine. That was when the light changed again. It exploded in a brightness so intense, it looked like a star detonating right in front of me. The intensity was absurd, impossible to look at directly. I covered my face with my arms and squeezed my eyes shut, feeling that glare pierce even through my eyelids. It lasted about 10 seconds of pure blindness, as if I had parked in front of a personal sun. And then, it was gone. Just like that. The light disappeared, leaving behind only the thick fog, as if nothing had happened. The silence was almost deafening. My heart was still hammering in my chest when, instinctively, I turned the ignition key once more. And this time the engine responded as if nothing had happened. I didn't think twice. I pressed the accelerator and drove the rest of the way without even blinking, keeping my eyes fixed on the road as if looking away for a second might bring that damn light back. Nothing else happened that night. In the days that followed, I told the story to everyone, family, friends, even regulars at the bar. Everyone had a theory. Strange headlights, drones, even something otherworldly. None of them convinced me. And the strangest part? Years later, already working as a long-haul trucker, I had another experience that made my stomach churn in the same way. I was finishing a delivery route between states, cutting through one of those deserted highways that seem endless. Two-lane road, sky full of stars, no sign of life for miles. The kind of scene that makes you feel like the last person on the planet. I had just over an hour until my next stop when I noticed something in the rearview mirror. A dark SUV keeping its distance. It didn't tailgate, didn't try to pass, it just stayed there. Always visible, always at the same distance, no matter if I sped up or slowed down. 40 minutes passed like that. The car never got closer, never disappeared. It just followed, as if escorting me. At first, I thought it was someone overly cautious, hesitant to overtake, but I discarded the idea after passing several passing zones without the driver even trying. I tried to ignore it, but every glance in the rearview mirror made my irritation grow. At 2 in the morning, I decided to stop at a small rest area. Not a full station, just a patch of dirt, a few poorly painted spots, and a shed with vending machines dimly lit by a weak, flickering bulb. I thought about stretching my legs, grabbing a soda, and most importantly, finally letting the guy pass. But as soon as I parked, I saw in the rearview mirror the SUV stop too, in the farthest corner. At that moment, discomfort turned into anger. I slammed the truck door and got out, determined to confront them. I walked quickly toward the SUV, showing my frustration openly. But it seemed the driver noticed my intention. Before I could get close, the SUV's engine roared suddenly. The car shot off, kicking up dust and stones as it vanished down the road, as if fleeing the police. I tried to see who was driving, but the windows were too dark, just a shadow behind the wheel. I watched that car speed back onto the highway, the tires chewing the asphalt as if escaping something bigger than me. In seconds, the taillights shrank until they disappeared completely, swallowed by the night. Part of me breathed a sigh of relief. I wouldn't have to deal with that irritating presence stalking me anymore. The other part, however, couldn't calm down. That sudden disappearance only reinforced what I had already suspected. They were after me, and not by accident. Nobody drives for miles on an empty road just to turn around and vanish into the dark without a reason. The very thought that someone was deliberately targeting me was enough to put my mind on high alert. Returning to the vending machines, which, to complete the irony, were completely empty, I realized how much that encounter had drained me. It wasn't just physical fatigue. It was as if my entire body had burned all its energy in minutes, leaving nothing but exhaustion. I considered continuing the journey, but every cell in my body screamed for a break. So I decided to give in. I did a quick check around the truck. Doors locked, cargo secure, everything in order. When I returned to the cabin, I reclined the seat, cracked the window to let in the cold desert air, and closed my eyes. For the first time that night, the silence felt comforting. My logic was simple. Even if they wanted to come back, finding this exact spot in the middle of nowhere would be practically impossible. The road was long, deserted, and unpredictable. There was no way anyone could turn around and find me so easily. That thought, combined with fatigue, knocked me out in minutes. I should clarify. I'm not the type who sleeps deeply. Years on the road teach you a kind of instinct. You learn to wake at the slightest sound because any lapse could cost your cargo or your life. This involuntary vigilance is almost like a sixth sense. That's why when I heard the faint sound of gravel being crushed under footsteps, my eyes opened instantly. I didn't move. I just slid my hand to the window blind and raised it discreetly. It was enough to see two figures crouched near the trailer's rear wheels. They were examining the locks like experienced thieves who knew exactly what they were looking for. A weak flashlight passed from hand to hand, illuminating just enough to avoid drawing attention. I couldn't see their faces, but I could feel the intent in the way they moved. My chest felt like it was going to explode, but one thing was clear. I didn't have time to think up elaborate plans. When I saw one of them pull a tool from their backpack, something that looked like pliers, my reaction was instinctive. I slammed my palm on the horn with all my strength. The deafening sound filled the empty lot, and their reaction was immediate. Both jumped back as if shocked and bolted toward the edge of the road. It didn't take 10 seconds before headlights appeared on the horizon. It was the same SUV emerging from nowhere, engine roaring and lights off, before vanishing into the darkness again. I didn't even have time to exit the cabin before silence returned. When my heart slowed enough for me to breathe, I grabbed my phone and called the police. I just wanted to report what had happened, but they insisted I stay until a patrol arrived. After a while, 2 officers showed up and helped me check if the truck was still intact. When the officers inspected my trailer that night, they confirmed what I had feared. Fresh pry marks, exactly where those guys had been forcing the lock. If I had taken a few more minutes, they would have succeeded. The most disturbing part wasn't the lock, but the officers' reaction. No surprise, no shock. They just shook their heads and said it was too common there. Cargo thieves. A silent, dangerous game that happens night after night, far from the eyes of those who think the highway is just asphalt and wind. They told me the SUV probably hadn't appeared out of nowhere. It had been following me for a long time, waiting for the exact moment I relaxed. And that detail stayed with me. It wasn't random. It was choice. I had been chosen. Driving at night has always been a kind of freedom ritual for me. Clear roads, responsive engine, darkness swallowing each mile as if the world belonged solely to me. There's something addictive about rolling down the windows and feeling the warm night air mix with the engine's roar, a blend of peace and power. But that night, the feeling was twisted. I still remember the sudden decision to leave the main highway and take secondary roads. I don't know if it was instinct or just that inexplicable desire to stretch the night a little longer. Narrow roads, sharp curves. It was exactly the kind of challenge I wanted to test the car's limits, and for a few minutes, it was perfect. Just me, the car, and the darkness, until the headlights revealed something that made no sense. A shopping cart stopped right in the middle of the road. It was so absurd that my brain took a moment to process it. A supermarket cart in the middle of a deserted road, close to midnight. I almost ran it over. Against all logic, I parked, turned on the hazard lights, and got out to look. It was just empty metal, nothing inside. No explanation. But as soon as I turned to return to the car, the fields beside the road spat out 2 figures running toward me. They didn't walk, didn't scream. They just charged with animalistic urgency. One of them went straight for the passenger door, hitting the car with such force that the sound still echoes in my head. The impact was sharp, almost inhuman. When our eyes met through the glass, I felt a cold that didn't come from the night. Their eyes were red, wide, devoid of human expression. Clothes torn, face dirty, maybe with dirt, maybe with blood. Frozen. I watched their hand trying to open the door, as if sure they could. That's when my body reacted. I shifted into gear and took off, swerving around the cart on the asphalt. I didn't look back. I didn't want to know if they were still chasing me. The way back was a whirlwind of thoughts. Part of me screamed that I should have helped. That person was really hurt. Another part knew that if I had hesitated another second, I probably wouldn't be here to tell the story. I called the police on the way, gave my approximate location, and let them handle the rest. Only when I parked at home did I realize the gravity of what had happened. The passenger door was stained with blood, far more than a simple scratch could explain. It was smeared across the mirror, the handle, even spattered on the rear panel. There was also a subtle dent, almost like a signature of the violence of that collision. My father freaked out the next day when he saw the car. He didn't want to hear my side of the story. To him, I was just the irresponsible kid who had taken the car onto the wrong road at the wrong time. And deep down, maybe he was right. Because even now I still wonder, what if it wasn't just a trick by some thieves? What if that blood wasn't just from someone trying to stop me, but from something I was never supposed to see? I never heard back from the police. Maybe there was nothing to report. Or maybe it was better that way. Part of me feels like I shouldn't care, but I genuinely hate thinking that a collision with my car could have ended someone's life that night. One night, unable to resist the urge, I went back to that same road. It was irrational, dangerous, but a part of me needed to see if the world had truly changed after that experience. The moon was high and diffused, casting the fields in a gray light that made everything feel quieter than usual. The wind blew in a way that seemed to whisper, and the hum of the engine echoed in a space that didn't feel entirely real. That's when I noticed something strange at the curve where I had seen the shopping cart. There were no physical traces, nothing concrete, but the air felt different, thick, almost sticky. My chest tightened, a mix of fear and excitement I still didn't know how to name. I took a deep breath and pressed on, keeping my eyes on the road, trying to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks. Then, for the first time since that night, I heard something I shouldn't have. A muffled sound like metal slowly creaking, but not connected to any car, any visible object. I froze, and the engine of my car seemed to downshift on its own, even though my foot was firmly on the gas. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and for a moment that felt like an eternity. I saw a shadow forming on the road behind me. It wasn't a car, it wasn't human, but it was there, hovering as if it weren't subject to gravity. The shape was indistinct, but something in its posture reminded me exactly of the figure I had tried to forget. The red eyes that glowed in my memory, peeking out from the darkness. I couldn't move. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my body was frozen. The shadow began to advance slowly, gliding over the asphalt without touching the ground, following every curve I took, every desperate maneuver. I screamed mentally, ordering it to disappear, but the darkness seemed to laugh at me, moving in sync with my own fear. When I finally regained some control, I made the only decision that seemed rational. I accelerated. The car responded as if eager to protect me, the fleeting sense of control almost giving me hope. But the shadow didn't back off. It kept the perfect distance, as if playing, remaining visible just enough for me to feel there was no escape. I reached the city, artificial lights flickering ahead, but the shadow didn't vanish. I parked at a 24-hour gas station, breathing heavily, feeling my heart pound in my chest as if it might explode. I looked around, and no one seemed to notice anything. Everything was normal, as if that invisible pursuit existed only for me. But when I glanced back in the rearview mirror one last time, I saw the same bloodstain on the car door, spread exactly like the night before, even though no one was there. A silent reminder that I wasn't just a driver on a deserted road, but a participant in something bigger, something that didn't settle for being ignored. And in that moment, I realized that the night, the road, and that presence were not an isolated incident. They had chosen me, just as I somehow had chosen them without realizing it. And the worst, or perhaps the most unsettling, was knowing that maybe there was no undoing that choice. You know, driving at night has an almost hypnotic charm. The empty road, the constant hum of the engine, the feeling that you are the only awake human on the planet. But the loneliness of the road also hides things you'd rather never see. It's that moment when your mind teeters between freedom and paranoia. You never know who or what might be watching. I still enjoy driving after sunset, but every time I see headlights appear in my rear view and linger too long behind me, I can't help it. My whole body freezes. My mind starts replaying that night. Maybe it's instinct. Maybe it's trauma. What I know is that no matter how beautiful the night road seems, there is always something deeper running alongside it, and you won't always want to find out what it is. Now I ask you, have you ever experienced something strange or unexplainable while driving at night? Share it in the comments. Your story might appear in the next video. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. But if you're driving later tonight, here's a warning. Be careful of who or what might be following you in the dark. Until the next story.